before this book came out, I wrote a book like this. Because I was such a big fan as a kid of Gilligan's Island that when I was in my teens, I started rewatching them. And I loved them so much, but I couldn't tell if I had seen all of them. Back then, you couldn't like go to a website and read a list of all the episodes. You couldn't watch them, binge watch them in order on Netflix. You had to watch them when they reran them on television. And I was watching them. There were like 3 channels that reran them every day. So you could watch them at different times of the day or night. But they'd be in a different order. Some channels would run the shows in order. Other channels would just flip them around in whatever order they felt like. I started a notebook where I wrote down a description of every episode I had seen. And then I would, have to go back and check. And sadly, when this book came out, I threw away that notebook. But I love this book. You can see it's laminated. I actually laminated the cover when I was in high school because I read this stupid book so much. But this is the Unofficial Gilligan's Island Handbook. This book is very special to me. It won't seem as special today because with the internet, we can find information about everything. But at that time, to get information about Gilligan's Island, impossible. There were no books at the library about it. This was it. I bought this with my birthday money one year at B. Dalton Bookstore in the mall, the Unofficial Gilligan's Island Handbook by Joey Green. They gave you a description of every episode. So here's episode 29, 3 to get ready. They give a long description. It just starts out, while digging a bait trap, Gilligan finds a clear stone that the professor recognizes as a cat eye, but which the skipper recognizes as the eye of the idol. And then we get 3 things at the end. Comments. So sometimes there's a lot, sometimes there's a little. This one, it says, the skipper foolishly allows Gilligan to save his last wish for the Castaways' rescue. So that's the comment on this one. Let me go to an episode with more comments. So on the episode Mine Hero, the comments are, the Castaways have more than enough metal to forge an anchor. They have a trunk full of cannonballs from episode 16, remaining parts of a Mars spacecraft on episode 40, and a silent movie projector on episode 43. Number 2, a World War II mine does not have enough magnetic force to attract Gilligan and Howell by their jewelry against the pull of their weight. Magnetic waves cannot be neutralized with ultra high frequency waves to a transistor radio. So he would really break down all the plot holes. And then Castaway quiz number 29. According to the skipper, which idol does the cat's eye Gilligan find belong to? The answer is Medusar. There are so many little insights in this. I mentioned yesterday this, and I'm going to read it from Sherwood Schwartz. Right here, it says, to this day, almost every time I see Bob Denver, we still argue. He thinks Gilligan is his first name, and I think it's his last name, because in the original presentation, it's Willie Gilligan. But he doesn't believe it, and he doesn't want to discuss it. He insists his name is Gilligan. Here's a list of all of the rescues that Gilligan ruins. When castaways would pass away, I would cut their obituary out of the newspapers. Jim Backus, Mr. Magoo, dies of pneumonia at age 76. So they had put Gilligan on the front and then his other famous character, Mr. Magoo. Jim Backus, the muttering voice of the nearsighted cartoon character Mr. Magoo and the self-indulgent millionaire of Gilligan's Island, died yesterday of pneumonia. He was 76. A native of Cleveland, Ohio, James Gilmore Backus studied at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, graduating in 1933. Here's a section of the book, Ginger's movie credits. What movies has Ginger starred in? A solve-it-yourself mystery. Here are the clues. She starred in The Hula Girl and The Fullback. Okay, that's her most memorable film. She created her own hula dance for it. She also starred in an unnamed movie in which he loved her with a burning passion and she loved him like a flaming fire. She starred in another unnamed movie in where she picks a lock with a bobby pin. She stars in an unnamed jungle movie where everyone gets lost, no one finds them, and they all die. The movie does have a happy ending, she says, because it made $1 million. I mean, this is great. In the day of the internet, it is less interesting, but in its time, it was groundbreaking. But I still think this is a fun read. It's a big, thick book. I mean, it's cool. This is here on Gilligan's Isle. This is the professor's book, and it says with Stephen Cox. So it's Stephen Cox's book that he put the professor's name on it. Not as good as the other one, but boy, a lot of great pictures. This is more authorized. The other one, unofficial, but this one, very authorized, nice behind the scenes photo. So this is probably when they had the plane that they took off from on the Castaways on Gilligan's Island. That's how they rescued themselves. They found this plane that was on the island that they had been stranded on for years. In this one, we did get an episode guide for each episode. A lot smaller, a lot less detailed than the Joey Green book. We got all the insight from the professor, so he tells his stories. I'll read you a passage here. Alan was nearly 68 years old when he died on January 2nd, 1990, leaving his wife, 4 children, grandchildren, and a long list of film and television credits, and more fans than can be counted. The last time I saw Alan was at one of our personal appearances together in New York. After the appearance, Bob, Dawn, Alan, and I were taken to the airport in a limousine. When we arrived to the main terminal of JFK, we said our goodbyes right there because our flights were jetting off in different directions. I don't know what was wrong with him at the time, but it was evident he was ill because of his dramatic weight loss. I kept asking Bob, what's wrong with Alan? And Bob said, I don't know. He won't discuss it. My last glimpse of Alan was watching him walk through the terminal towards his gate. As usual, he was wearing his cap and carrying a small bag over his shoulder. I stood there and watched him for a while. Alan walked very slowly and he slumped a bit. I knew he was a sick man and it saddened me. Trinket said Alan was sick almost 2 years before anybody knew about it. He carried his illness with dignity. He even hid it from her, and she found a string of doctor bills for treatment of cancer with the thymus. Trinket remembers Alan's last day. In the hospital, Alan said to me, honey, you remember what I want, don't you? And I assured him I did. When Alan died, I was in the room with his sister and the hospital priest. Right outside his room, you could see the church steeple in the distance. I looked out the window at the steeple and I prayed that if he couldn't get well, that God would take him. I hoped he would take him at sunset. Alan would have wanted that. By that time, Alan was unconscious and peaceful. Honest, just as the sun went down, Alan opened his eyes and looked at me. I leaned into him and I said, I love you. And he took a deep breath and he died. The priest said, I think we all just witnessed a miracle. Wow, that's beautiful. It's a beautiful passage. This is a great book. Highly recommended. I'm going to highly recommend all of these, by the way, except for one, I think. So I'm still choked up about the skipper dying. I love that skipper. All right. Here on Gilligan's Isle, Sherwood Schwartz, the guy who created Gilligan's Island. This one also had some papers inside. So let's take a look at some of these first. So this is from the TV guide after Gilligan had passed away, after Bob Denver had passed away. You can see this, by the way, very famous TV guide cover because Mary Ann was on this side, and it was a shot of the 3 of them, and they actually cropped her out of the picture. You can see some of the newspaper tributes. The mate was a mighty sailing man. Again, this one also contains an episode guide. Episode guides were important because, again, you wouldn't be able to get them anywhere else. This was, like the first book that put one of these out, you were like, oh my God. So now we know the order. I mean, because otherwise you didn't even know what season it was, except for that the first season was in black and white. So I'll read you a little passage. This is Sherwood Schwartz, creator of Gilligan's Island. This is from the chapter, You Can't Win 'Em All. That was the month back in '63 when the network executives from the East flew west to get a preview look at pilot films for the following season. Pilot films were generally not finalized at that point. Editing was incomplete without stock shots, and the pilots were seldom dubbed with final stage and music. Dick didn't even hear me. He was so excited he just babbled on. Every single one. I can't believe it. What a day this is. Somehow Dick managed to put his arm around my shoulder without losing his jacket. Sherwood, I broke every record. I just screened all my pilots for Jim today. All of them. And I'm sure this has never happened before. I couldn't believe what Dick Dorso was saying. Surely he hadn't sold 5 pilots to CBS yet. You mean you sold everything? That's right. Calhoun, Kabee Hates Fitch, Mark Dolphin, John Stryker. Suddenly Dick broke off as he realized who he was speaking to. Sherwood, he used my name again. I'm sorry, really sorry. I was just so excited I didn't realize it. It wasn't all of them, almost all. I'm afraid Gilligan's Island didn't make it. So Gilligan's Island had a tough road to get on the air. Interesting to hear it from Sherwood Schwartz's perspective. His son did an interview on the Milo Beasley show. I'll put a link in the description. It's pretty good. All right, this one. So this book came out during the run of the show. You can see they have some cool illustrations of when Mr. Howell and Gilligan had a duel to the death, apparently. Look at this. I don't know what. "Look at this tablecloth," Mrs. Howell said. "There are crumbs all over it. Do something." "Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am," Gilligan said, hurrying around the table. He grabbed a hold of the fringe of the tablecloth. He whipped it off the table and shook it vigorously in the face of the Howells. "Gilligan, stop it," the Howell cried, waving his arms wildly. "Watch the crumbs." Gilligan dropped the tablecloth and got down on the floor on his hands and knees. "What are you doing now?" Howell raged. "Watching the crumbs," Gilligan answered. "You told me to watch the crumbs, but they're down here on the floor. I can't watch them from up there. I'm nearsighted." This is a Gilligan's Island book. Finally, we've got Tina Louise's book, When I Grow Up. I met Tina Louise. She was selling this book. She did it at a bookstore. It's a children's book. And she was disappointed, clearly, visibly, and verbally, that there were not a lot of kids and a lot of grown men that were fans of the TV show that she had started. And she told all of us this. And so we were allowed to get an autographed copy because the store insisted that if we had paid for it, she had to sign it. But she signed it under protest. She wrote it, she made it out to that's my middle name, Anthony. And she signed it nice, but she refused to take a photo with me. I remember she started to explain more and I was like, "Look, I'm a really big fan of yours and I don't want this to be a bad interaction. So I'm just gonna happily take this book and wish you well." And I left. But it was unfortunate. She was not, and here's the thing. So she's selling this book. Now, I'm gonna read you a little bit of this. "If a seal can swim deep underwater, I could be a scuba diver." That's 2 pages. 2 pages she wrote. She wrote 2 sentences. "If a chameleon can change his color, I can be a fashion designer." This is the whole book. She didn't draw the pictures, by the way. Just wrote the words. "If a dog can help a person cross the street, I can be a police officer." I'm not sure I get the connection on that. But anyway, fun little book for kids. The only reason we were getting it was because it was Tina Louise. I mean, you have to know that when you, like this, she should have been so happy to see us. Been like, "Well, great. These guys are going to buy this stupid book. How about what if you had said this, Tina Louise? Oh, if you buy 2 copies, I'll take a picture with you." I would have bought 2 stupid copies. You would have sold an extra copy. Why did you do that, Tina Louise? Very disappointing. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. If you do, be like Fonzie, who never appeared on Gilligan's Island, but give it a thumbs up and go, "Hey!" That helps with the algorithm, gets more people to see these videos, and I do appreciate it. Right now, there's going to be a box over here and a box over here. You can choose either one because I'm in both. I'll see you back here tomorrow. It's going to be a whole fun day. Got all kinds of new stuff. Going to be looking at some board games. I can't wait. I dug out some good ones for you. So come back tomorrow, 2 o'clock. I'll see you then.